Hello and welcome to Unwind Sessions, where right after my shift I give the highlights of my workday and answer any questions that might have been asked at a previous session. My name is Juan. I am an English Spanish medical video remote interpreter with over 4 years of experience, and today is Thursday, July 8th, 2021, and today I took a total of 30 sessions. It was a mix, like always, audio sessions and video sessions. I did take quite a few audio sessions, but they were not as lengthy, so the day didn't go by as fast because of that. But also, I don't know, it seemed like kind of a slow day today for some reason. The last session though that I took, it lasted a little bit shy of an hour, probably 50 something minute range, and that was the longest session that I took today. So that was pretty much it. There is one highlight that I want to talk about, but nothing related to interpreting. It's just something that happened today that was quite I don't know how to say it, terrifying. But other than that, nothing much. So first of all, I want to talk about yesterday's video. And as if you already saw yesterday's video, you could see that I went ahead and I interpreted the LEP part in Spanish. Like, the LEP said his utterance in Spanish, and I just repeated it in Spanish. And the provider understood me, right? So everything went well with that session. And I think I'm the only interpreter, right, that can get away with that, like having a Spanish utterance and actually saying it back in Spanish and having the doctor understand and everything. So that was beautiful. I told you that's why I named it amazing. But other than that, all kidding aside, honestly, I don't know. I have no idea what happened there. I didn't even notice that happened. Like, for example, when I messed up on willpower, which I'll never forget, fuerza de voluntad, right? I'm never gonna forget that. I just so the other thing was that I didn't know how to say eggplant, right? The gentleman said berenjena, and I couldn't remember eggplant, so my mind went into panic mode, and then I had to write on my notes. I usually take my notes in English, so in spinach, mushrooms, and onions, I actually had to write them in Spanish because of how hard my brain was working at that moment. But I managed to get that one at the end. But yeah, I was a little bummed out that I couldn't get willpower, but hey, that's what happens, right? We're not dictionaries, and we have a brain fart every once in a while, and that's what happened to me. And honestly, I had never done any of my video sessions, and they're tough. They're like tougher than real life, because you know you're gonna run out of time. Like, you have a set time to actually go ahead and give your interpretation, and if you don't give your interpretation in that time, then the other party is gonna start speaking and you just blew it, right? So that seemed a little difficult. Like, that made it difficult in my mind, because I knew that I had to get the interpretation right away or I was gonna run out of time. So that was something different from like a real life situation, because in a real life situation, of course, the person, for the most part, they wait until you're finished interpreting before they actually speak, right? So, like, for example, in a real life situation, like, I didn't remember the translation for willpower. So in that situation, in a real life situation, what could I have done? I could have started giving the utterance, like the interpretation, real slowly, while I was looking in the computer to give the translation. And then once I already had the translation, I could just go back to normal speed and give the correct interpretation. Or what happens sometimes as well is I don't even have to look it up in the computer, because I know, like, it's in the tip of my tongue. I just don't know how to say it for some reason. And what happens there is that I still say it slowly, and then once I remember the thing, then I go back to normal speed and I give the interpretation. So that is one thing that I didn't know about this practices, right? And that made it really, really tough, because your interpretation needs to be on point right away, or else you're gonna suffer the consequences, and that's not something that happens in real life. So that made it a little difficult and a little challenging. But I mean, of course I can tell you what I did wrong there, but when I gave that utterance in Spanish and I was supposed to give it in English, like honestly, I didn't even know that it happened. If someone hadn't mentioned it in the comments, I would have never even found out about that. So that was a once in a lifetime thing, and you guys got to witness it, and it's there for all eternity, right? So it's good that I left it there, and I think it was good. That way you can see that that was a genuine interpretation and not rehearsed to make it look all bomb and stuff. That was just me real interpreting. That is how I do it. There were no tricks, nothing. Just plain old me doing my job the best of my ability. So I hope it was good enough for all of you to to improve on your knowledge right upon that, and I'm pretty sure it was. So yeah, I was very happy with the outcome, and now I'm very happy with all of the feedback that I'm getting from that. So that was awesome, and thank you guys. Thank you everyone that took the time to comment the video, and everyone that liked the video. So thank you so much for that. And moving on, there is just one highlight that I want to mention before going on to a couple of reviewers' questions from yesterday. And this is nothing to do with interpretation, but this is just one of those crazy stories that you get while interpreting, right? Those are the bonuses, I guess, from this job. Sometimes they're not all that great. For example, today, like, there was a gentleman that went in with a knee injury. Now, I think he had a cut or something pierced his knee or something, because they had to perform an evaluation to make sure that that piercing or that hole did not go all the way into the knee joint. So it was like more superficial. And they told the gentleman that they had to do a test for him to make sure that that piercing or that whatever it was, that lesion, how the doctor called it, that lesion did not reach the joint. So what did they have to do? Well, they had to stick a needle full of water into his knee joint, and they didn't have to stick a needle full of water into his knee joint, right? They had to stick the contents of the needle, so water, into the knee joint, and they had to put it all the way in there to make sure that no water got out of that lesion. Because if water got out of the lesion, that man had bad luck and he had to go into like surgery for his knee. So luckily, the gentleman didn't have to go into surgery. That thing didn't, like, no water came out of his lesion. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about was the poor gentleman. Like, he saw the needle and they were getting ready to do that thing, and he just looked at the needle and he said, am I not getting anesthesia? And then the doctor looked at him and then he said, no, it doesn't even make sense to give you anesthesia, because we would just have to poke you, and then you're gonna get pain from the anesthesia poke, and then you're not gonna feel anything, and then we have to poke you again. So that's just too much work. We're just gonna poke you right away, and we're just gonna feel it, and that's it. You're only gonna get one poke, and it shouldn't really hurt that much. And the gentleman said, oh, okay. And then as soon as they drove the needle in, whoa, that gentleman started screaming like his body was getting pulled apart. Like, honestly, I couldn't even stand his screaming. It was bad screaming. I hope that never happens to me, or I would have told her, if that ever happens to me, I'll be like, you better put some anesthesia on. I'm not doing this without no anesthesia. And then like the gentleman like kind of got used to the needle, and then the doctor said, all right, now we have to put the water in. So the gentleman was like, what do you mean that's not done? And then he was like, you're gonna feel a little better pressure. And then they started putting the water in, and the gentleman started screaming even worse than before. And since no water came out of the lesion, the gentleman was lucky. And then they told him, all right, now we have to take the water out. So the poor gentleman was already in so much pain, and they told him it was only going to be a little pain. They lied to him, those mean, horrible doctors, and they took the water out. So the gentleman was in pain, but luckily he wasn't going for surgery, and he was going to get better in a few days. So, I mean, that's a once in a lifetime experience, right? And you're never gonna see this again unless you work in healthcare or as an interpreter, right? So yeah, I just had to let you guys know that. So moving on, I have a question from Mr. Walter Alvarado, one of our viewers, and he says, hi Juan, I've been working as a medical interpreter and I know I have a long ways to go still. I envy you in a good way. Did you take any specific training or course before you started working as an interpreter? Love this video. It's talking about yesterday's video. So thank you for that. And well, before that, first of all, I want to let you know that you shouldn't envy me. You shouldn't envy anyone, not even in a good way, because like, I don't know how long you've really been interpreting for, but I've been interpreting for 4 years, a little bit over 4 years now, 4 years and a half, to be precise. And well, you shouldn't really compare yourself with people that have more experience, right? Because they have time on their side, which is experience, right? They've dedicated a lot of time to whatever they're doing. Like in my case, I don't know, you've probably been interpreting for 2 years, I'm gonna guess. So I am like 2 years and a half ahead of you in time and experience, practice and experience, right? So of course, like, since you don't have all that experience, it doesn't make that much sense to actually compare yourself to me. Like, it wouldn't make sense for me to compare myself with someone that has 8 years of experience, right? What I find is better is to compare yourself to you and you only. Take for example me in this example. You can take me as like comparison, right? Like, one day you are probably going to be better than me, but you should never like compare yourself, like trying to beat me, because it won't make sense, right? Because if I were to be an interpreter, like, you are never going to be as good as me at the same time. Like, it could happen, right? It could happen, but for the most part it's never going to happen, because I am ahead of you 2 years in experience. So by the time I have improved my skills and I have more theories and more stuff, then you are going to be at that level that you wanted to reach, and I'm already going to be up here, right? Or the other person is going to be already up here, and you're never going to catch them because you're going to move up. Like, you can catch them, of course, but that rarely ever happens. So that is a bad thing, like, to compare yourself, in my opinion, to other people. Of course, you can use them as a point of reference, but that's just going to be a point of reference at that moment, right? And once you reach it and you get above it, then that's good. But you should only be comparing yourself to yourself, and honestly, that makes a very, very big difference. And that's a much better way to actually look at it, right? Because I mean, well, it's easier to be better than yourself than to be better than someone that's actually experienced, right? And that can actually make you feel frustrated and make you feel like you're never going to reach it because that person is always climbing higher, right? If you compare me to even to yesterday, I have more skills today because I did that video yesterday, so that was a learning experience. So if we compare ourselves to people that are more ahead, we will never finish and we are always going to be below them for the most part. So compare yourself to yourself, compare yourself to yesterday, and make sure that every day you are always better than yesterday. And now I'm sorry if that was a little bit too long, but I just had to say that. And now going back to your question about any specific course or training that I started when I started as an interpreter, and I've already answered this question I think in a couple of other videos, but maybe I didn't like those explanations, so I'm gonna go ahead and try it again this time. And so before becoming an interpreter, I had to take a 40-hour course and a test that was provided free of charge by the company that I worked for. Now, what did we learn there? They gave us extensive lists of vocabulary of the industries that we would serve, mostly customer support. And it was like 12 people in that group, and we actually had to get a phone and actually call a landline. It had to be a landline. We had to call in to a meeting, kind of like a Zoom meeting. I don't remember if it was a Zoom meeting or what it was. Probably it was before Zoom was cool. And we were on there. And so we called into the meeting, and the first day the trainer just started talking to us about note taking, about tips for interpretation, and just general stuff. And that was just the first day. The rest of the days it was just interpreting and taking notes. Now the trainer would just read from a scenario, like the scenarios that we have right here on our channel, and one person and one person only had to interpret an utterance that the trainer had read, and the rest of the people in the training were listening, and we were on mute, and we were giving an utterance, right? So like if it was my turn to interpret, the trainer would go ahead and speak, and then after the trainer was speaking, I had to interpret to the trainer what he just said, right? And if it was not my turn, I still had to interpret out loud and take notes. Oh, and I had to take notes as well. So I had to interpret out loud and take notes, but the trainer wouldn't hear me. It was just more for me to practice, right? And you just had to write notes and interpret as if the trainer was hearing you when it was not your turn. And it was an utterance per person. So we got a lot of practice. That was like excellent practice. And another thing is that the trainer would evaluate us on precision, like word choice and completeness. And we also had to let him know what we wrote down for the notes. That way he could give us tips or let us know how we could actually improve upon that. And that was that. After that course and that test, I became an interpreter. Now for medical training, I was still in the same company, and they gave us another 40-hour course and another test. At the beginning, they told us about HIPAA, they told us about ethics, they told us about the role of the interpreter in a healthcare setting, and all of that good stuff. And then they gave us lots and lots of vocabulary and endless videos about anatomy, medical profession, illnesses, surgeries, and all of that good stuff. And we also had interpreting sessions similar to the ones that I mentioned before in the first training, but if I am not mistaken, that was only for one day. And I remember we didn't get that much interpreting practice on that one because I was only evaluated in one utterance, and I don't remember how big were the groups. I mean, they were a little bigger, that's why I only got an utterance one time. But the rest of my interpreting practice was just muted practice, which served the same purpose, and it was great. And now when I got hired for the company that I work for now, we did have to get a test to get hired, and I scored an 85, by the way, or an 80. No, I think I scored an 86, and the limit to pass was an 85. So I barely made it. And to be honest, they were looking for 2 years of experience as a medical interpreter, and I only had like a year and 2 months. So I got very lucky, and um, I stayed with that idea, and now the company does not accept interpreters with less than 2 years of experience as a medical interpreter, because most of the people with less than 2 years of experience are failing that test. So if you don't have that experience, they don't even consider you. So I was very lucky to be considered and to pass, right? Even if I pass, passing is passing. If you pass by 1 point or two, you pass, baby, and I passed. So I was very happy about that. And I wanted to mention that because, well, during the training for the test, well, you can bet that I was practicing and training and just trying to get all kinds of information to pass that test. And after we passed that test, we had this very awesome video training. It was like 2 hours long, and it was just basic medical information for interpreters, and I really did learn a lot from that training. It was mostly about the human anatomy and like the teeth, the inside of the ears, the eyes, like very specific and very awesome. I learned a lot. And I remember that during the training, I was like just taking screenshots of everything, and then I had my notebook, and then I was writing everything. And I just learned so much. I think I still have the notebooks and the pictures from that training. So I just learned so much, and that was also something that I hadn't remembered. But yeah, that also helped me out a lot in being a medical interpreter. And that was it. That's all the training that I got to become an interpreter. And other than that, I mean, I'm not a certified interpreter. So I hope that answers your question. And moving on to Fabiola Miller, and well, her comment said, I did click on buy you a coffee, and I hope it's you. It is us, and we really love you, Fabiola, because your videos are very helpful. Thank you for that. And is shoulder blades espaldilla? Now, before I answer your question, thank you very much for your support and all of your comments and all of the questions. Keep them coming, only if you want to, of course. And you gave me a great idea for some future videos, and so some future videos are probably going to be titled like 20 medical professions every medical interpreter should know, 20 common diseases all interpreters should know, and stuff like that. So thank you so much for that wonderful idea. And yeah, just thank you so much for all of your support again. So moving on to your question, now you actually had to, you made me go ahead and research, which I love. That's why I love your questions, because you make me go ahead and step out of my comfort zone and actually go ahead and get down to doing research, right? So that way I can learn, like I tell you all the time, that way I learn and you guys learn. So that makes me feel very good whenever you ask questions that I actually have to research that I don't know the answer to. So upon researching, I actually found out that the correct translation for shoulder blade could be, like you mentioned, it could be espaldilla. And here are other possible acceptable translations for that. And I'm going to put them in Spanish as omóplato, paleta, paletilla, or escapula. Now, I do have to give you an explanation into why you shouldn't use it. And now I saw that in the definitions for paleta and paletilla, although they are also used for humans, they are mostly used for animals. So whenever you refer to paleta or paletilla, now you're probably referring to the shoulder blade of an animal. So that's why I wouldn't use it to talk about a shoulder blade if you're talking about a human in a medical setting. And another thing is espaldilla. If you actually go ahead and put espaldilla into Google and look for images, you're gonna get a cut of beef. So the definition for espaldilla from wordreference.com or .org, I forgot what that was, but you probably know that website. It says, espaldilla es el cuarto delantero de algunos animales destinados al consumo. Now, the second definition for that is parte de la pata delantera del cerdo que va del codillo hasta la pezuña, especialmente la que está cocida o curada y salada como el jamón. So that definitely tells us that espaldilla is just for animals. Now, that is not to say that people won't use it, because of course, if people that actually come from like a ranch or something and like they don't have that much schooling, they probably never heard of it called an omoplato or an escapula, right? Because they don't have that vocabulary. So they might call it an espaldilla because of course that's the first thing that they know that comes to mind for them, right? So it's good that you know it, and that if that ever happens to be mentioned, then you already know that they're most likely talking about their shoulder blade. I would clarify just to make sure, but yeah, I would say other like that is used mostly for animals. However, let me go ahead and give you the official definition from the RAE, which is Real Academia Española, and that definition is cada uno de los huesos de la espalda en que se articulan los húmeros y las clavículas. Now, that means that every bone that of the back that goes to the shoulder joint, right? Like this is the clavicle and this is the humerus, and I actually looked it up, and guess what? The only bone on the back that connects to this joint is actually the scapula. So of course that is the definition of shoulder blade, right? So why did they define it like that? And I don't know, maybe I need to do a little bit more research, but from the research that I could find, it was that the only bone that's there other than the humerus and the clavicle in the back is the scapula. So yes, it is correct. Espaldilla is the scapula even for a human being. So just to sum it up, like it is correct. Yes, you can use it. Now, I wouldn't use it. I wouldn't use it because from the research that I did, I could see that it refers more to animals. So that is the only reason why I wouldn't use it, unless you are actually referring to the animal part, right? Or the beef cut or whatever. So just to sum it all up, I say go ahead with omoplato or scapula for shoulder blade when referring to humans, and you can use paleta, paletilla, or espaldilla when referring to animals. So that is going to be pretty much it for me today. Remember that I'll be here every Monday through Friday after work. And I also want to let you guys know that we have a Patreon page where with as little as $1 of your support, you can actually help motivate us and help us to create much more content. And what does that dollar support give you? It actually gives us access to all of the content that we have on Patreon right now. You just have to help us with a little bit as $1. If you want to help us with more, then more is welcome. We're not going to tell you no, right? And what do you get for that $1? You get all of the medical practice videos ad-free. You get scripts for all of the medical videos. You get answer sheets for all of the medical videos. You get vocabulary lists for medical interpreters and much more exclusive content. So we really hope for your support, guys, so that we can make much more content that is relevant and that will actually help everyone, right? We're gonna raise the bar on interpreting. That way you don't do what I did yesterday. So thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you liked the video and have not done so for more content. And don't forget to share. Happy interpreting. Goodbye.